Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Wool.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a great return guest for you today, Adam Croft, who, if you've been listening for a while, you may remember talked all about BookBub ads and how to effectively make money with them last year. He is, we're going to kind of check in on some of the stuff he's been doing since then, and he's also got a new book out on kind of cultivating an effective author mindset. So, and that's not something we talk about a lot on here, but it can certainly make a huge difference in how successful you are. So we're going to be chatting all about that. And just to remind you, Adam is an international best-selling author of crime fiction. The episode he was on last year was 151, if you want to go back and check that out. And his new book is The Indie Author Mindset, How Changing Your Way of Thinking Can Transform Your Writing Career. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
Thanks for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to add to that introduction or do it better than I did?
No, I think that sums it all up perfectly.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us what you've been up to for this last year? It looks like you've published a new novel at the beginning of summer, and you mentioned you were going to launch another one pretty soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think about 3 weeks after we last spoke, I moved house, so that took up quite a lot of time. But at the end of January, I had a psychological thriller out called Tell Me I'm Wrong, which became, I think by May, June time, became my biggest selling book that I've had, which is good. It's overtaken Her Last Tomorrow now. So yeah, really, really happy with that. And in July, I had my eighth Night in Culver House book out. And I think it was August, the Indie Author Mindset came out. So yeah, it's been a busy year, and I've got another one coming out in 2.5 weeks. So yeah, spent a lot of time sitting at this desk over the past year. This is basically where I've been.
Well, it looks like you have a good, comfortable leather chair there, so that's good.
Oh yes, yeah, I've got a bad back, so I've had to invest.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing. I've got the Herman Miller Aeron that I like.
Is that the one that was a kind of a weird design thing at first and people hated it and it's become really big?
It's mesh, so it's a little different than anything else out there, but it's become kind of iconic, I think.
It's like the best-selling chair in the world now, I think, isn't it?
Possibly so.
Yeah.
And well,
geek moment for you.
Yeah, for those who are like cares about chairs. Do you want to tell us if you're still using the BookBub ads and if anything's changed on that front?
I am, yeah. I've been. I just set up another load today, actually, for my pre-order for my new book. So yeah, checked in again, and it's the system still seems very similar. The dash is updated. That's what I like about BookBub. They add things in. I mean, for example, there's now. Which I don't think there was a year ago when we last spoke. Even if you've got CPM bidding on your ads, you can now, it shows you an effective cost per click column in the reporting, which was a really easy thing to do. It's just a kind of a basic calculation that anyone could have done, but they've added that column in. I'm going to pretend it's because I suggested it. I don't know if it was, but I'm going to take the credit anyway because no one else has. But yeah, it still seems to be working. It's very effective. I think I mentioned last time that it's mainly effective if you're wide. It's very good for sales on iBooks, which I think is now Apple Books. Nook, Kobo, Google Play. It can work on Amazon as well, especially if you're in KU and you mentioned that on the ads. But yeah, it's sticking around. It's still good a year on, which perhaps the same can't be said for. I mean, AMS recently, people have been having some trouble with that, and there's been a lot of whisperings that it's become less effective. Facebook keeps going through these cycles as well. People pick up again. People say it's not working. We're coming up to Christmas and Thanksgiving and Black Friday and all of those things that happen about this time of year, which means that we're going to be in competition with the big boys, and we're probably going to get squeezed out, and something else has got to work. And yeah, I'm a big believer in BookBub ads still, and I think this time of year especially, your dollars can go a lot further on a platform like that, where you're not going to be squeezed out by big advertisers.
Yeah, it is a crazy time of year. I usually don't launch anything new myself. Like if I'm continuing on in a series, I'll keep going. But like last year, I waited till right after Christmas and had a pretty good launch. And I remember I did some of the AMS ads and stuff then, and Facebook, and everything was a lot cheaper in January.
It is, yeah, and yeah, I've had a couple of books that have done really well. They've been out that time of year. Both Her Last Tomorrow and Tell Me I'm Wrong had a December and January release date, respectively. So I'm kind of testing the water a little bit and perhaps throwing caution to the wind by putting this one out at this time of year when advertising is going to be more difficult. But yeah, I'm hoping I can hoping I can push through that. If it doesn't quite work, I might rein it in and try again in the new year. We'll see. But that's the beauty of being indie. You can play it by ear, and you can change things, and you can just pull your advertising one day and start it up when you need to again. That's that's the good thing about it.
Yeah, and I think a year ago, BookBub just had the clicks that you were paying for option, and they've since added in paying for 1,000 impressions. Is that right?
Yeah,
Am I remembering?
yeah, yeah. The other way around actually. So it was CPM generally anyway, and I've now introduced CPC. I've not found that works for me. I've not done any testing on it in a while. I do need to again. So that statement might not still stand. But generally speaking, I found that for me, CPM does get me the same clicks for cheaper. I know generally speaking, people tend to find the same thing. There are a few people who have found that CPC bidding works better for them. Again, like anything, there are no rules as to what works, generally speaking. There's no one size fits all. And the beauty of it is that you can set up ads and you can do different bidding modes and you can try different things and see what works best for you.
Definitely, and I think if you do like 6 or 10, then you can really get an idea for which ones are resonating most and getting the
Yeah.
most clicks for the least money.
Yeah, I mean, BookBub's great for that because you can see straight away what's working. You haven't got to rely on Amazon's reporting. AMS is the dash is dreadful. You never really know what's going on with that. It's just guesswork. But yeah, BookBub, you can see straight away. There's no delay. There's no kind of scaling and building things up. It's they're on or they're off, and you can see within hours whether it's going to work or not. So yeah, I'm still a big fan.
All right, cool. And one last question on that for me. I probably asked this last time too, but who remembers after a year? It looks
I
like
don't.
you it looks like you launched most of your books at $4.99. Do you feel that that's kind of necessary as a full price in order to make the clicks worth it, or is it possible if you're doing a 99-cent book to be worth it if maybe it's a series starter?
Um, I don't do 99 cents, so I don't know. My strategy generally for a launch is that I put it up for pre-order at £1.99, $2.99, and that then allows people on my mailing list to get their pre-orders in. It kind of rewards them for being there and for being loyal readers. So and then on release day, it goes up. And that's when I start my advertising. And as you say, I can get a better return by having a higher price book. There's a bigger profit margin in there. The unit sales are probably lower, but for me, money wise, it seems to work out better that way. So yeah, that's my strategy. Doesn't work for some people. I'm going to test different ways of doing it as well with future books. I have done in the past too. I send out a survey to all of my readers every year and ask them, what they get out of being on my mailing list, what they're there for. And the number of people who are there because they want either free or discounted books is decreasing all the time. And depending on the results of the next survey, I may tweak things and do something different so that the main thing is that the readers are getting the value that they want, whether that be financially, literally, or whatever other value they get through being on the mailing list.
All right. Now, when you talk about BookBub as an ad, it seems like one of the big struggles that people have, especially when they're getting started, is trying to figure out whether they should be focusing on a single tactic and trying to perfect it and min-max it and get it all to be as much as it possibly can, or if they should be sort of spreading themselves out and hedging their bets. Do you think it's better, when it comes to advertising, or really anything? Do you think it's better to focus on one method and become very good at it, or try to get experience in an assortment?
I think it helps to at least have your fingers in different pies when it comes to advertising, because things do change very quickly. And I'm I mean, generally speaking, I'm very much about looking at the long term and protecting yourself and making sure that you can adapt and change as things go on. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of KU, because of the exclusivity clause. I don't like anything where if something just sort of changed or went down overnight, that people's careers would be ended. That's not something that I'm cool with. So yeah, I think trying lots of different things and seeing what works for you is great. And if you're getting particularly good results from something, then by all means put most of the resources there. But I would say, yeah, it's worth keeping your foot in with the other places. With Facebook ads, with AMS, it may not be your main focus if it's not working for you, but if you're not still doing it at some level, you're not going to know when it does start working for you.
That's absolutely true. And like when you're like monitoring this sort of thing, do you feel like there's ever a threshold where it's like, well, that absolutely wasn't worth it and I'm just not going to do it anymore? Or do you sort of continue sort of low grade and see if maybe changes will improve it in the future?
It depends how disastrous it is. Sometimes if it's really bad, then yeah, I'll just scrap it. But yeah, I like tweaking. I like testing. And there's no such thing as a bad or pointless advertising endeavor. Even if you're not getting direct sales from it, you're getting people looking at your books. And for example, on Amazon, it's considered a bad thing if people click on your books but don't buy it. But on iTunes, Apple Books, as it is now, it's actually a really good thing. The number of touches on your product page actually, it's seen as a good thing in Apple's ranking algorithm. And even if people aren't buying, you can still get a boost in the charts just by having touches on that product. And it's a branding exercise as well. It gets your name in front of people, gets your book in front of people. Next time you have another advert out somewhere else or in another form, people will recognize the name. Let's not forget that traditionally speaking, marketing and advertising aren't meant to turn a direct profit. Now, McDonald's don't put an advert on TV and then the next day you see how many burgers they sold as a direct result. It's part of a long-term game to get their name in people's minds. So next time they're out and they're hungry, that's what they're going to look for. So there's all these different things that come into play. So just because you're not making a direct and measurable ROI on a book doesn't mean it's not working in some form.
So now that you've been doing this for a while and have experimented with various forms of advertising, is there anything you think people would be surprised to learn, be it positive or negative? For example, these ads from this company are absolutely fantastic, and these ones, which are the most popular, just stink.
I think the thing that people are surprised to learn is that they kind of see the success I had with marketing Her Last Tomorrow and Tell Me I'm Wrong through Facebook ads, and they were both massively successful, and they were single standalone books, but that they were 2 of 23 books that I've got, and the other 21 I just cannot market through Facebook ads at all. It just doesn't work for me. Even box sets, which people
welcome
say
to the club.
Even the things that people say are meant to work, box sets, and collections, high price point items, series starters. I'll still do it because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, people kind of, I think, sometimes hold me up as I set up a Facebook advert and it's guaranteed to profit, but it's not like that. I've had a couple of times where it's really worked, but yeah, generally speaking, most of my ads bomb as well, and most ads do. And the good thing about it is, you can have 21 failures and 2 successes and still make a hell of a career out of it, and sell a hell of a lot of books. So it's I suppose what I'm saying is there are ads that stink everywhere, and there are it doesn't take much to do well when you do find that good ad. So it's a case of kind of plugging away, and I'm always surprised about what works and what doesn't. When I'm setting up new ads, I can sit there for ages and create one and go, yeah, I really like this graphic, I've spent hours on the text, this one's really going to nail it, and it just dies on its backside, and I can throw something together in 30 seconds and think, oh, that'll do for now, and that one takes off. It's I've given up trying to guess what people are looking for in many ways. I test and try to find out what's going to work, but yeah, sometimes the odds just throw you a complete curveball.
That's exactly what I was thinking about when you were talking about this. And the reason I do like 10 different ones, because it's never the one I think. There's like, I'll think, oh, that's awesome. People are going to love that. And then like just recently I tried, we had Brian Meeks on, mentioned that like, you'll like this because is a really good, for some reason that connects with people. And I tried one and it sounded stupid, like because you like fun books. And it's like the best performing one. I'm like, dang it. He knew what he was talking about.
That's a psychological thing in copywriting. If you're saying you're connecting with the person, you're speaking directly to them. I mean, I guess that's why my books that have hooks have done well. Could you murder your wife to save your daughter? What would you do if you discovered your husband was a serial killer? It's it's speaking to you. It's asking what you would do. And because works really well as well. I think there's an experiment that's been done numerous times. I can't remember who first did it, but they tested it, I think, in a queue at a shop or at a post office or something, and they asked if they could jump to the front of the queue, and they found that what actually gave massive levels of compliance, I think it was 75-80%, was if they said because. It didn't matter if the reason was rubbish, but if they gave a reason and said, sorry, can I go in front of you because I'm late for something, or because I've got a letter to post, which everyone's in a queue at the post office because they've got a letter to post. That's what they're there for. If you say, can I go in front of you because I've got a letter to post, it's like 75% of people let you. It's a weird thing that the word because kind of seems to give something validation, and it works in copywriting on ads as well. And I've forgotten the original question now.
I was just agreeing with you that it's good to try a bunch of different things because you probably don't know which one is actually going to perform best.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's it does surprise you what works and what doesn't.
Well, you've been doing these, I call them thrillers, but I think it says crime fiction. From a fantasy author perspective, it's all the same to me. But you've been doing really well
people
with
die. People die.
Yeah. It sounds exciting. It's a thriller.
Yeah.
But you've been doing really well with them. So what made you decide to jump over and write the indie author mindset book?
Well, I think because I've had a couple of books that have done well, and I've done a lot of podcasts, and I've kind of tried to help other authors. I get a lot of emails from people asking me things, and the stories that people have and the things that they get stuck on are really, really wide and really, really varied. But the more I looked at problems people were coming to me with, there was a common thing there. And generally speaking, it was kind of the wrong way of looking at things and not quite understanding what was going on. And I kind of found myself more often than not, rather than kind of deliberately addressing the concern or the question that they had, I found there was something much more fundamental, much further down the line, which had kind of gone off on a tangent and they'd ended up here when they should be over here somewhere. And for me, the kind of the mindset and getting in the right way of thinking about things seems to be at the root of all that. And looking back to when I first started having some success, that was what happened for me. I started treating my writing as a business. I took it seriously. I took it more seriously than my full-time job. I sat down, I put the hours in, I was professional about it. I started tracking data and really kind of just getting serious about it, I suppose. And it just kind of struck me that mindset was kind of it's the foundation of everything else, and the rest of my writing career has been built on top of that. It's as simple as that, really. It just seems to be the basis of everything.
Okay, we're going to ask you a few specific questions about that, but I am curious for those authors out there that are thinking of doing nonfiction themselves, because I actually think it's probably easier to sell nonfiction if you're willing to build up a platform. And I know Joanna Penn talks about that quite a bit, how she loves the fiction too, but she finds a very reliable income from the nonfiction. Any tips for people that might want to do that? I noticed you put an L, like you had a different author name for the indie author mindset book. Do you think people should keep them separate to try to do that?
Well, I put it, my normal name, Adam Croft, is on the cover. When in the Amazon author field, I put Adam L. Croft because what I didn't want is for it to go into my normal Amazon author profile. I've spoken to a few people who've done fiction and non-fiction, or they've done different genres. And they've said what happens then is the also bought starts to get contaminated. So, people will be looking at my my fiction books, and my name will have, because of the indie author mindset, would have been started being linked in Amazon's mind with people like Joe Penn, with Mark Dawson, Brian Meeks, David Cochran, everyone else who does kind of non-fiction books for writers. And my crime readers aren't interested in those, and vice versa. People who are looking to find out about indie publishing aren't interested in crime fiction, probably. So it's just, in terms of the also boughts and Amazon's algorithms, just kind of keeping the two separate. So but similar enough so that people still know that it's me. So that was the main reason for that. In terms of what I would say to people looking to do non-fiction, I'd say get the audiobook sorted out pretty quickly, because non-fiction sells really well in audio. I've done no marketing towards it whatsoever, but last month, which was the first month it was out, in fact, it was only out for about 2 weeks of that month, but it sold more audiobooks than all of my other ones put together. I think I've got about 16 out there. So yeah, that was really, really popular, especially with no marketing. Yeah, you do have to build up a platform again. You've got to build up a new audience from scratch. That's something I'm working on. Fortunately, I've got a half decent name, and there's a few people who kind of know me from doing different things, and I've got a little bit of a head start there. But even so, it's you've got to start again. New mailing list, new Facebook groups, all of that. And it's really given me a flavour of what new writers are doing when they're having to start branding themselves from a fiction point of view. I'm doing that now with my non-fiction, and it's when I started doing that, it was nearly 10 years ago. So I've kind of lost perspective a little bit about what it was like. So it's good for me to have to start again as well from the beginning, and to see what writers now are having to do, because it's a hell of a lot harder now than it was when I started.
Absolutely. Now, you say you're not really doing a lot of marketing on your nonfiction?
Well, I am not particularly to the audio book itself, but yeah, on the book, I'm doing AMS ads and various things like that. And I've done some Facebook, haven't worked massively well. I'm looking to do a bit more kind of organic stuff, sort of podcast interviews, building my mailing list, and speaking engagements, things like that. I think it's a different form of marketing for non-fiction than fiction. I think it's easier to market in some ways, but you've got to do it in a different way. So so I'm learning, and hopefully getting another string to my bow, and learning about the non-fiction side of marketing, as well as just the fiction, which is what I've done to date, really.
We've heard from a lot of people who do nonfiction that when you're trying to market as a fiction writer, you're basically trying to sell the books, and if you are marketing as a nonfiction writer, you're basically trying to sell yourself. And how you sort of need to convince people you have a level of authority so that they trust that the words you're selling them are valuable to them. So it sounds to me like you're talking about doing speaking engagements, and what I guess what I want to say is, it seems like a fiction author making a shift to doing a nonfiction later on, after having a career of some kind in the biz, would be a lot easier than, say, someone trying to start off as their first book out of the gate being a nonfiction book. Yeah,
well, I mean, especially if your non-fiction is for writers, it does help if you've written a few books and got those behind you. And I'm always the first one to say, when it comes to listening to experts and listening to kind of authorities, that you've got to look at who it is who's talking to you, and see what their credentials are and see what they've done. I'm the first person to say that. So yeah, I've got to stand up to my own test when it comes to that. And you're right, it is a case of branding me rather than branding a book. There's no plot. Each book has, I guess it solves a problem, or it gives a solution, if you like, to issues that the potential readers are having. So yeah, you're selling something different. You're selling a concept and an idea in a different way to you are with fiction. So it's been a learning curve for me, and it's a lot of fun, as I say, to kind of almost go back to square one and start again and learn how to market a different type of book.
All right, for those who have been waiting for some tips on maybe how to shift their mindset to to maybe finish more books or sell more books, could you talk a little bit about what exactly do you mean by that word? Is it just getting organized and getting serious, or is there more wrapped up in it?
Well, it's a massive, massive subject. Trying to condense it down into a book, I had to cut quite a lot of the kind of the extraneous stuff and really kind of um, get quite tightly focused in on things that were going to help writers. So I condensed it down into three different types of mindset: the professional mindset, the business mindset, and the visionary mindset. The business mindset, I think most kind of indie authors have realized that's something you've got to have. You've got to realize that you are running a business. You've got to understand things like ROI, profit and loss, and just generally the business side of things, and the fact that you've got to market and advertise. You're going to be running a business as well as being a creative person. And the visionary mindset is more about looking at the fact that this is a long-term thing. It's not necessarily how many books you're selling today or even this week. I've got some of my books, the weaker selling ones, that might sell of £6-7 a day, but they're books that I wrote 8 years ago, and they're still selling that every day, and that's a few $1,000s a year, and it's a few $1,000s every year. And when you actually look at the amount of time I spent writing that book and how much it has earned since then, it's a ridiculous hourly rate, to be honest with you. So it's that kind of 20 books to 50k thing, I suppose. It's getting more work out there, and thinking about the long term, thinking about residuals. It's about ownership and control over what you do as well. So it's like having your own ISBNs, because in the long run, you've got the ownership and you've got the control there. You haven't got create space next to it. If anything happens in the future, you can take your ISBNs elsewhere. It's about looking at your rights, your intellectual property, things, just getting serious about things like having your own website rather than having something on Wix or WordPress.com or something like that. It's kind of thinking long term, and this is where I come into things like KU, and that's why I'm not a fan there, because I think having all your eggs in one basket is not a serious way to run a long-term business. I don't think it's there's some good money to be made there, and as soon as Amazon drop the exclusivity clause, I will be the first one in, and I'll be telling everyone else to go in as well, because I think the subscription model is great. Netflix is brilliant. Napster and Spotify and things like that are fantastic, but they don't tell, Spotify don't tell artists you can't sell your CDs in shops. Netflix don't tell Steven Spielberg you can't have your movies out in movie theaters. That'd be crazy. He wouldn't do it. So why do authors put up with that with books? I don't think it's going to be good in the long term. So the visionary mindset is about looking at things long term, getting your mailing list sorted out because of the long term benefits of that. What have I done? The business, visionary, professional mindset as well, which is what it means to be a professional. It's not just the fact that you're being paid for something. It's being professional is an attitude. It is a mindset in itself. It's about turning up each day and putting the hours in. It's about taking things seriously. It all sounds quite vague, I suppose, when you're describing it verbally on something like this. But they're the three different kind of angles, I think, which most apply to writers.
I feel like I've met a lot of writers that haven't finished their first book yet. Like maybe they start a whole bunch of them, but they never quite finish. And I was that way for a long time myself. So I would imagine that maybe is part of your readership. And then the people maybe that wrote a couple, but they're just not getting the sales they expect. They're not building it up. Or who would you say is, like, who are you hearing from and what are their problems?
Well, that's the beauty of it. I'm hearing from people who've got all sorts of different backgrounds. I mean, people who have written, perhaps they've started different books, they've not quite got them finished. I think the professional mindset aspect of it probably applies more to them. They're getting productive, organizing yourself, from a kind of psychological point of view to actually get this done. The business mindset and the visionary mindset side of things helps people who've got books out but perhaps aren't selling as well. So that's the thing that's kind of struck me the most, really, is that it's something that I know it's a cliche, but there's something in there for everyone. Some of it can seem quite basic if you're way down the line, but even some big name authors have been getting in touch with me and saying that there are things there that they knew but have not really thought about in a long time, and I've kind of put a different spin on it. And I think generally what people are saying is it's a kick up the backside, and that's my style anyway with things. I don't tend to kind of pull many punches. So yeah, it's a good kick up the backside for people at any stage of their career.
Now, you gave your three things: professional, business, and visionary. And I think a problem that a lot of people have, like, maybe I'm projecting, but it seems as though a lot of people, once it gets to be business, like professional, business, visionary, artist isn't in there, and I think that a lot of people, when they say, like, well, I don't really want to treat this like a business because it's supposed to be an artistic outlet and everything like that. So how do you sort of help people get past what they see as perhaps business making it a little bit dirty when it comes to books?
Well, the artist aspect of it is a given. We're writers, we are creative people. If you're reading the indie author mindset, you're a writer or you're interested in writing. I don't need to teach you to be creative, but the fact of the matter is we're in 2018 and we have to be business people with it. Some people say, well, I'm not interested in doing the business and the marketing, so I'm going to go down the traditional route and going to go and get a publisher. And, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're still going to have the same problems, because even if you're with a traditional publisher, you're very, very unlikely to get a big marketing budget. Even if you do, you'll still be expected to do a lot of the stuff yourself. You'll be expected to do a lot of the marketing and a lot of that legwork. I present a podcast with a fellow crime writer called Partners in Crime, and we interview a lot of big name crime writers. We've spoken to Linda LaPlante, Tess Gerritsen, Peter James, massive names, and they all tell us that they still have to do a lot of the marketing and a lot of the kind of the PR stuff themselves. The publishers do get on board with it, but even the big names still have to do it. So, for the vast majority of writers, you're not even going to get that level of support. You've got to do a whole lot more yourself. So there really is no way around it. It's 2018. We're going direct to market here as well as indie writers. We are selling our books directly, and good books that are not marketed well do sometimes rise to the top, but it's rare, because the vast majority of people are doing some form of marketing and advertising. And it depends what you're writing for. Some people will be writing just because they want to write. They're not interested in making money from it, and that's absolutely fine. I wish I could do the same, but unfortunately I can't. I have to make some money from it. And if you want to make money from it, then it's a business. That's the way you make money.
Have you ever encountered someone challenging your advice you've given on a particular subject? And if so, how did you handle it?
Yes, I just put them in my next book and kill them off. I wasn't sure if you were serious, and I was like, oh, what do I say to that? Yeah, generally speaking, if you have to ask yourself that, the answer is no. I'm really serious. But yeah, it does happen quite a lot, of course, and it's fine. It's not the kind of industry, as I said earlier, where there's one size fits all. There's quite often no right answer. It's what works for various people. All I can say is what's worked for me. When it comes to marketing and advertising and tips and things like that, I can only say what's worked for me or what I think would work for them. Of course, there's the other aspect to it. I've been quite vocal about things like KU as it stands because of the exclusivity clause, and other people say, well, I do really well with it. Some people have, think I'm wide of the mark when I kind of, try and think 5-10 years in the future, how's this going to affect people? And they think that I'm, perhaps kind of away with the fairies a little bit on that, but that's fine. It's that's what this is for. It's for encouraging debate, and it's all opinion, really. There's not a lot we can do about it. There are very few facts in this industry, unfortunately.
I do think that authors can be a hard group to sell to because we are very critical. And like, if you're giving advice, the first thing we do is go look and let me see how well your books are selling. Is this person worth listening to? I don't know. Do you have any advice for maybe people listening when they are choosing who they should listen to? Because I know when I got started, there was like J.A. Conrath blogging, and there was K-boards and some success stories, and that was about it. And now there's so many people out there with books and courses, and there's so many different marketing things you can do, and you can write to market, or you can just try to market what you wrote that you loved. How do people that are just overwhelmed like kind of choose maybe their little internet mentors to follow?
Well, that is the problem. It's the opposite problem to what I had when I started 10 years ago, because there was pretty much nobody around really. As you say, it was a lot easier to. Well, it was more difficult to pick up the information because it wasn't there, but there was only a few people actually giving it out as well. So yeah, we are kind of bombarded perhaps with too much information. The signal to noise ratio can be pretty low at times. I suppose it's a case of what kind of appeals to you and to your way of doing things. I know that when I sort of switched my mindset and started getting serious about things and started selling well, it was Mark Dawson's courses and his videos that kind of spoke to me. I liked his style, his way of doing things, his kind of approach to it being like a business, and his way of doing things and his style just kind of worked for me, and it made it much easier for me to kind of pick things up and to and it just appealed. So I guess it's probably something similar. Find it, there are no right ways of doing things. People ask me about marketing and what I do, and I can give you the exact wording of my ads and the exact same audiences, and it probably won't work for you. It's the same with all these different gurus and teachers, I suppose. You've got to kind of either soak up a little bit from everybody, or find somebody or a group of people who kind of appeal to you and who speak to you in that way. It's one of the problems I have with the industry, I suppose, that there's too much stuff out there, and I'm guilty of adding more to it. But perhaps it's arrogance on my part that I think that that my advice is better. I don't know. I suppose it's something that the market will tell, and that the readers' feedback will tell us.
Now, Lindsay was saying how when you start researching whose advice you're going to take, you sometimes will look at how successful they are and make your decision on who you're going to believe based on how successful that person was. Do you think that success and advice, the value of advice, should be directly tied, or is there room for like do as I say, not as I do type stuff?
Well, yeah, I think you've got to look at who's giving you advice, look at the success they've had, because I think the thing with the internet and with social media is that anybody can set themselves up as a guru and set themselves up as a teacher. I don't think we need more bad advice out there. But yeah, what made me chuckles when you said about do as I say, not as I do, because I think I'm massively guilty of that myself, and a lot of the tips that I give out, I don't follow. And that's, I think, more of a kind of a time thing. So yeah, I think there's a mixture of both. I think when it comes to me, it's definitely do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, it seems like I mean, there are many stories on this show of when I'm like, listen to this bad idea I'm about to do. Like I almost gleefully do the stupid thing. But I think that there's value in looking at, like, if you're auditioning a teacher to, like, this person should be my mentor, to a degree, what's more successful is how many of their students were successful. Like, obviously, you want the person to be successful, but if you're going to be learning from them, you want to have the success that their students might have.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And of course, there's the flip side of that. The more people who are successful at something, the less likely it is that somebody else is going to be successful. When Facebook ads took off, the big problem was that everybody then started doing Facebook ads because there were people who had success with it. Me being one of them, and more people doing it kind of flooded the market, and it stopped working as well. I mean, the whole self-publishing industry is that as well. When I started, I put a book out there. I had no idea we even needed to market it. I put it up there, and I did a little bit on social media, and it worked. It kind of took off, and it hit number one on the store in April 2011. And I don't know why. It was a hell of a lot easier. There were very few books out there then, but getting anywhere near there since with a much bigger audience. and a much bigger fan base has been near enough impossible for me, because there are lots of self-publishing success stories out there, and millions of people are doing it, and it's the industry itself is like that.
Speaking from someone that is going to tell you that you're not ever supposed to say never, but I'm pretty sure I'm never going to be releasing a self-help book. So I've always been curious about something. You're saying that you can help the aspiring authors by changing your way of thinking. Have you ever had anyone say that they bought the book, but it hasn't helped them? I mean, are you obligated to give a refund? You just say, okay, sorry to hear that. Is there anything else I can do for you? I mean, I was kind of curious how you handle a negative situation like that, because I've always wondered, like, that's one thing I would think about if I'm going to write a self-help book. What happens if they don't help the person?
Being completely open and honest, it's not happened yet. I mean, the book's not been out long. I
don't mean to jinx you, so I'm going to say that right now.
No, I'm not saying it's perfect, and it will happen. There will be people it doesn't help, of course. It hasn't yet, so I can't speak from experience. But I mean, generally speaking, I'm a pretty helpful person. I get emails daily from authors who are having troubles with things, and I spend time and I help them, and I've never charged an author for doing so. I like helping people and helping them get the most out of their career. I find it genuinely disheartening when people say to me that they've had books perhaps a year or two ago that sold really well, and now things aren't working, and they're out looking for jobs and thinking of going back to full-time work and things like that. I hate hearing those stories, because there but for the grace of God go I, as the saying is, and it that could easily be me or could be anyone. So I guess that's one of the reasons why I wrote a book rather than doing a course, because I don't want to go and take $500 or $1,000 off of somebody to pass on the knowledge. I wrote a book. I spent some time writing that book, and I put it up for sale, and it makes a little bit of money back. It's not something that I want to make a career from, because it's just something that I enjoy doing. My career will always remain crime fiction and thrillers. This is just a way of I guess ensuring that I can spend the time helping people, because otherwise it's all time spent helping people, in emails and Skype and not enough time actually spent writing. So this way I get to write and exercise my writing muscles at the same time.
Earlier, you were talking about how important it is to have a long-term view of these things. And I think that's hard with your first book. It's all about how much am I going to sell this month, and maybe even your first couple of years. But I really agree with this. I was just, the other day, I had a series that I wrapped up in like 2013, and I haven't been advertising it at all because it has these old covers that I've wanted to get recovered. But I noticed that they were still selling over 100 copies a month of these $5 books that I finished up years and years ago. So if you go into Book Report, a lot of people have that now, you can see what the lifetime value of a book was, and it becomes more and more important or noticeable after 5 or 10 years. So I guess I just want to agree with you. You cannot underestimate, don't get discouraged just because the launch wasn't everything you thought it should be.
No, I mean, if you were with a traditional publisher, those books wouldn't be on the shelves anymore. So, the fact that, the virtual bookshelves are endless and timeless. And I'm not a fan of book launches. People keep saying to me, I do big launch days and big launch events. And not only the launches not matter, because like you say, that you haven't got to fight to sell as many books as you can in 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever. They're going to be there for years and years. But spikes in algorithms quite often don't help. They can be harmful on some vendors. So I'm not a massive fan of building up to a big launch and doing all of this stuff. I announce it to my mailing list, and I give them a chance to get the book at half price. And then if it's a book that I think I can advertise well, which is normally my psychological thrillers, then I, on release day, put it up to full price and I start running some Facebook ads. But other than that, I'm not a big fan of spikes. I'm a big fan of doing things long term. As I was saying earlier, I've got books that sell a copy every day or every day or two, and like you said, at the end of the month it can be a few $100, and that adds up over a year, and it certainly adds up over 10 years.
Maybe this is a mindset issue too. I run into a lot of usually newer authors that they insist that like, I'm going to sell my book at $6.99 or $4.99 for the ebook. I would never make it free. I would never make it 99 cents for sale because my time is worth more than that. And I always think, well, it's really more about what you make at the end of the month and how much an individual book sold for, especially if you've got like a whole series and the other ones are full price and you can use that as a loss leader. Do you have any thoughts when it comes to like getting your brain around it doesn't really matter so much what this book sells for as in like what I can make at the end of the month after all the expenses are paid?
Yeah, bottom line is what counts, especially if you're doing it to make money. There are different types of readers. There are readers who will only read free at 99 cents, and there are readers who won't touch those because they think those books aren't any good, and they'll only buy high value books. Which is why I kind of hedge my bets, I suppose, by pricing things differently from different times. I do different offers. You know, if you run a BookBub promotion, for example, or you have a particular promotion on a vendor, then drop the price and pick up some of those readers who read the cheaper books. Especially if it's a first book in a series and you've got a few books out in that series already. It's it's that drug dealer policy, isn't it? It's give them the first one for free or for cheap and get them hooked, and then they'll buy the rest at full price and get onto the harder stuff. There are different ways of doing it. It depends what your end goals is, what your end goal is, or end goals are. It depends what kind of readers you want to pick up. I think, you'll want readers who are going to buy our books for $5 or $10. Of course we do. It'd be great if all readers did that. We'd all make a hell of a lot more money. But we've got to understand the different types of readers, and everybody's different. And I think if you're going for the mass market, then you've got to open yourself up and try different things. I think there's no need to have all of your books priced at 99 cents or $1.99. Have them at full price and drop them occasionally for a BookBub deal, or for a deal on one of the other book promotion websites, or just for your own promotion. Try different things, see what works for you. There are times when I'm for various reasons, I'm chasing volume. For example, as I was saying earlier, on iBooks, getting a lot of hits on the page and getting a lot of sales in a short space of time can really help. And the iBooks charts are very sticky as well. That's something that doesn't really happen on Amazon. The charts are actually quite hard to find now on Amazon. So rank doesn't feed sales in the way that sales feeds rank. On iBooks, it's rank definitely does feed sales. If I'm purely looking to make profit, I'm not worried about unit numbers. I'm just looking for a decent return at the end of the month. And a higher price point works. You've got more margin there, especially if you're pushing ads to it.
Yeah, I think that your point to just be willing to experiment is a good one. And I've certainly seen people do high priced and they're stubborn and they stick with it and they can make it work. There's something to be said for just trying to get more readers in the funnel. And you never know. I've certainly had people that are like, I never buy books, or I never buy expensive books, but after I read your book one, I went and bought the whole series. So it's certainly possible to kind of convert people into paying full price for stuff.
Yeah, and there are just as many people who don't buy cheap books. There are people who say, I'll never buy a book that's under $5 because it's going to be rubbish. And I think for the long term of the industry, higher pricing is probably a good thing too. I think the race to the bottom is probably not great. That's one of the reasons why I'm not really a fan of 99 cents. I think that does devalue a book too much. I think $1.99 for promotional reasons and for perhaps for launches or chasing ranks is one thing. But I think the race to the bottom is probably only going to harm everybody. And in 5-10 years' time, we might be looking back and wondering why we did that.
That is true, because I've certainly seen people too that have their whole catalog at 99 cents and they're in Kindle Unlimited and they're making big money from the page reads right now. But if that money, if it gets cut down, how much you get per page at some point, and you've got this whole audience of people that's not going to pay more than 99 cents or for their subscription, then it could be tough to recover from that.
Yeah, and I guess they're readers that they're going to be far more fickle, and it's going to be much harder to build a long-term foundation there. I think if you've got readers who are happy to spend more money and are happy to spend more money at different vendors, then you are protecting yourself a lot more in the long run than just kind of relying on the freebie seekers, inverted commas.
One of the highlights you've got kind of on your mindset book is that you should try to get like a half a dozen different income sources for one book. Are you talking about the audiobooks there, or what exactly are you talking about?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's various different ways in which you can you can get multiple different income streams. I mean, people think of a book as being just a book. Perhaps it's an ebook and a paperback. But if you use companies like Ingram Spark, you can do hardbacks as well. There's a growing industry in large print. I know a few authors. Jo Penn, I think, is one of them. She does really, really well with large print because a lot of the time libraries, especially in the UK, they're really, really struggling for funding. There are libraries closing down. The money's just not there. And they, more often than not, will buy the large print version of a book rather than the normal trade paperback, because a lot of library users tend to be older. Perhaps they've got some sight problems. And a large print book can be read by them and by everyone else, whereas the trade paperback can only be read by everyone else. So large print is, again, it doesn't cost you much more to set up one of those than it does a normal paperback. Audiobooks as well, and don't forget this is one book you've written, and we've already got 4 or 5 different products there. Box sets as well. And once you've got a series running, you can put them in box sets of 3 or 5 or however many, and that doesn't seem to cannibalize the sales of the individual books either. There's translations and foreign rights. If you can get an agent on board and sell. I mean, today, for example, I sold the rights to one of my books in South Korea, of all places, and I'm never going to sell a book in South Korea otherwise. So that's just some free money that comes in from a book that I wrote a couple of years ago. So. Same with film and TV rights. If you can get an agent on board for those, this is the same book, the same work, the same story. You've done nothing extra. You haven't had to create another product. It's a different branch coming off of that. If you do non-fiction, you're looking at workbooks and courses and other material that comes off of that, speaking engagements, all from just one product that you've created. So I think looking at a book just as a book, as an ebook and a paperback is quite short-sighted. I think in the long term you can get easily sort of half a dozen to a dozen different products out of one book.
All right. Now, just speaking of these different income streams, obviously some of them are not in your control. Like you're not going to be able to just bring in somebody for a translation. But for stuff that isn't in your control, like the paperbacks, the large print, and all that, how important is the timeline on those? How important is it that they're released roughly around the same time?
Not massively. But it's good to have them out if you can, especially if you're doing a lot of your marketing around launch date, which a lot of people do. It does help if the products are there. It's tricky with things like audio to get that in time and tied up with the ebook release date. Paperbacks are also a bit tricky as well, but you can kind of get there or thereabouts. It's handy if you can do it, but if you miss the boat, then swim after it. don't just give up and stay on the shore.
Of those income streams, are there any of them that are more important than the others, in your opinion? Or should one take precedence over the other?
I'd say if you're doing non-fiction, you should probably very, very much aim to get your audiobook out as soon as possible and for launch if you can, because as I mentioned earlier, audio has been a revelation for me. It's something that I just left and hadn't done because I've done some fiction. I've invested thousands of pounds into audiobooks for my fiction, and it's just not returned any money. Well, it has returned some money, but nowhere near what I've spent on it. So I did it for non-fiction because a fellow writer, non-fiction writer, Sasha Black, she said to me, look, non-fiction does really well in audio. She said, you've got to give it a go. So I did. And I did it myself. I got somebody just to do the editing and the mastering, and kind of did that on the cheap, really, I suppose. And it's done really, really well. So I think if you're doing non-fiction, that's got to be a big focus for you. If you're writing fiction, box sets I think are excellent. They don't seem to cannibalize the sales of the individual books within them. I'm still not entirely sure why. I've got a few theories as to why, but the main thing is that it works. So I think And again, I think it's mentioned that things like translations and foreign rights and film and TV aren't practical for authors at all stages of their career. But I think you'd be surprised. A lot of the times, it depends on the concept. It depends on the book and the time it hits. I think agents aren't necessarily too worried about the success the book has had or the success you've had as an author. If it's the right book at the right time, they'll be interested. And there's no harm in going out there and pitching it. It doesn't take up much of your time, and they can only say no, in which case you've lost nothing. So they're definitely avenues that are worth chasing, and it's free money. You're not going to make a film or a TV series out of it yourself. I'm certainly not going to translate my own books into Korean, so somebody else doing so and paying me for the privilege is absolutely fine with me. And you're leaving money on the table if you don't at least go out there and try to chase it.
Yeah, I actually have readers every now and then are like, you should make this into a TV show, or you should make a movie. I'm like, I'll get right on that. I'm sure it doesn't
I have it
cost
done for
much.
Tuesday. Yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah, why haven't you turned this into a film yet? I'm still learning how to make films.
I do want to agree with the box sets. I love those. I've talked about it on here before. I'll often do a different cover and a different blurb and throw it into different categories. And it seems like I can get they're all people that would enjoy my book, but I'm able to kind of slightly change it and attract a different readership.
Yeah. I think there are people, as I said, all readers are different. There are people who like to read each individual book, and there are box set readers. There are people who like to kind of pick up a bargain and are happy to sort of take that gamble. And it's again, it goes back to kind of trying to cover all bases and trying to pick up all readers. I don't think we can be so specific and say we only want people who buy expensive books, or we only want people who buy individual books. I think picking up people who buy box sets, picking up people who only do audio, picking up people who only do large print. The beauty of it is that the setup costs for those things are next to nothing. There's just no reason not to do it. It's not as if it's going to cost you $5,000 to do a large print edition, or to an audio book will, but to do a box set, as you say, it's reformatting and doing a new cover. It's fairly minimal effort, really.
Do you have any suggestions for authors that maybe they're selling fairly well and they want to make themselves more attractive to foreign rights, like different publishers in different countries looking for that? I know actually Joanna Penn, she's probably, her ears are burning because we keep talking about her, mentioned that when she put together her press page, I think Curlette Press, that she actually, publishers came to that page rather than her author site, and that was kind of how they found her to offer her a foreign rights deal. Should we all be having kind of a website or a separate website geared towards maybe somebody looking for the film rights or the foreign rights?
Yeah, quite possibly. It can be dangerous to negotiate those things on your own. I know Joe's got a bit of a background in things like that, so she's an exception. And Mark Dawson as well. He's an ex-lawyer, but even he uses an agent for those things, and we've got the same agent, in fact. And yeah, I prefer to let the agents do those things, because I just wouldn't know how to sell ebook rights in Estonia. I wouldn't know I wouldn't know how to work my way around the contract. Film and TV especially is an absolute minefield, and you can really get taken for a ride there. It's something that I do and I don't want to be involved in. I want to be involved in the sense that I want my books to be adapted for film and TV, of course. Who doesn't? But I'm happy to kind of stay one step back from that, and to let the people who like to like to be involved in all of that to do it. So yeah, I'm very much of the opinion that I will try and let the experts do what they're good at. It's the same as I do with my books. I'm even though I've got a background in graphic design, I won't do my own covers. Book design is a completely different thing, and I'll let the experts do that. So it costs you nothing to get an agent, and those people will be out there actively trying to get you those deals. You don't have to wait for someone to come to you. They'll be out there, and they'll know how far they can push it. They'll know that an offer is not a good one, and they'll be able to get some more for you. So they work for you. So I would personally, that would be my approach. But if you're comfortable with publishing contracts and with translation contracts, then yeah, it's not a bad move.
Yeah, I think Chris Catherine Rush has a book out there on contracts for those who are interested in just really controlling everything and doing it themselves. Or if you do get that offer, at that point, it's pretty easy to go out and find someone, either an agent or like an IP lawyer or something that can look over things.
Yeah, I mean, even the Society of Authors and Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors. That if you're a member of those, and you should be, then you get free legal advice there as well, and you can send the contracts to them, and they'll have a chat with you and advise what you might want to change or what you might want to look out for. We're a self-regulating industry, but we've got some organizations and some guidance there to help people. So that's something I would suggest as well.
All right, we've been talking for almost an hour, so I guess we're going to wrap it up here with my last question is just, how important is global thinking in this author mindset? I feel like especially here in the US, we look at the Amazon.com store and how our book's doing there, and it's a little easy to get obsessed with that and forget about the big picture. What do you say to folks that, should we be really thinking about other countries right now and just other stores, not just Amazon, of course?
Yeah, well, I mean, in Canada, for example, Kobo, I think, is bigger than Amazon in terms of market share. In Australia as well, I think Amazon is biggest in the UK, but it's not as dominant as it is in the US. So yeah, there's a big wide world out there. Kobo are very good at exploiting those different markets. They're definitely a company to get into bed with, I would say. I'm currently looking at working with them on some translations as well. For some European markets, they're very forward thinking in some of the things that they're doing. So yeah, I think we do need to look global. I think it's a market which is an industry which is still very young, and it's in a constant state of flux. I think everything online is. But it's not to say that Amazon is going to disappear within the next 5 years, but stranger things have happened, and I think opening ourselves up and running a business in a way which is as much focused on long-term thinking as it can be and as future-proofed as it can be is probably the wisest way of doing things.
Absolutely. Now, when you're past a certain point in your career, if you're lucky, opportunities start to present themselves to you in your inbox. And we were talking about translation rights and all that. And maybe, well, when an opportunity like this comes along, which ones do you think you should jump on versus which ones maybe you should avoid? Like, for example, you're talking about your audiobook is doing very well. If you had not self-produced it, if somebody else had picked it up, you wouldn't have had that upfront cost, but you also would be making a smaller amount on each sale now that it started doing well. So like, how do you balance the offers that might show up?
I think it's knowing what you want and knowing your own priorities. I mean, there are certain things that I just don't want to get involved in, and I'm happy for other people to do it. There's some things that I like doing. I've got a background in audio stuff anyway, so I like to get involved and to narrate my own books and to do things there. So it's knowing yourself and knowing what you want from it. I think having some kind of representation and having an agent can be helpful as well, because they're going to know what's good to do and what's not. But I think following your heart is always a good thing to do. Follow your gut. That's something that I've always done, and it's kind of served me fairly well. But yeah, make sure, especially if you're talking contracts and you're talking about signing over rights and intellectual property and things like that, the importance of that just really can't be overstated. So, for the sake of $100 a year to join Ally and get their free advice, that's something I would definitely advise.
All right, so my final question for you is, what words of advice would you offer if you encountered someone who said they are an inspiring author and asked for your advice?
There's so much you could say. People say to me things like, how do I sell more books? Where do I go from here? And it's just, how long is a piece of string? So generally speaking, I tend to distill it down to 6 words, which is backside on chair, fingers on keyboard. I think the only thing that will work for everybody and anything that's guaranteed to make you some money and to advance your career is to write more books.
Nice. Couldn't agree more.
Well, that's about all we've got. Is there anything you were wanting to bring up, Adam, that we just didn't ask you the question and you'd really like to get it off your mind before we sign off?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything there.
Awesome. Well, remind folks where they can find you online, and it's the Indie Author Mindset they should check out, right?
It is, yeah. That's available on all platforms, of course, because I follow my own advice like a good boy. But yeah, my website is adamcroft.net. I'm on Twitter at Adam Croft, and I'm on Facebook as well. I've got a Facebook page under my name, Adam Croft Books.
All right. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening, everyone. This has been episode 201, and I'll put the link to Adam's book and his website in the show notes at marketingsff.com. So come on by or hit him up directly. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Adam.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So long, everybody.